This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Hannah Viviers in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. Migrants retreat after confrontation with Polish border guards. We'll bring you the latest. ISIL claims responsibility for deadly bombings in Uganda's capital, Kampala. And one dead and thousands evacuated in Canada's British Columbia following heavy flooding. Well, our top story this hour, the situation remains tense along the border between Poland and Belarus after violence erupted between migrants and security forces. As the unprecedented crisis keeps unfolding, journalists have been barred from the area. Well, our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic joins us from the Polish-Belarusian border town of Białystok. Thank you so much for joining us, Alyosha. What's the latest on this situation?
Well, Hannah, we had not so easy night. Well, according to Polish authorities and to Polish police, they said that a number of times or several times migrants tried to storm the border fence, which is temporarily border fence erected maybe a couple of months ago along that stretch of the border between Belarus and Poland. And that border is maybe around hundreds and hundreds of kilometers between those two countries, and just one small part around town of Kuźnica, or village of Kuźnica, is the epicenter of the migrants crisis recently, and all the Polish forces are actually concentrated around that village, around that small town. And of course the migrants are camping from the other side of that border crossing. But what Polish authorities are saying is that exactly that concentration of the Polish security forces at that area is used by many migrants to sneak into Poland at the various other locations in small groups. As I said, it is hundreds of kilometers long border between those two countries, and just that small stretch of several kilometers is around Kuźnica, and many of the Polish forces are actually concentrated there. But we don't know, and we can't independently verify what's actually happening there, whether this is truth or not, because, as you said, Polish authorities banned all journalists from the so-called exclusion zone, which runs along the entire border with Belarus, and it is 3 kilometers deep. From our perspective, they can tell us that, for instance, maybe Vladimir Putin is riding a bear top naked, and he's leading migrants into charge across the border to Poland, but that's something we cannot independently verify.
Alyosha, we've also heard of the dire situation that migrants are going through at this border, and just from this escalation of this crisis, it sounds as though the migrants are getting very desperate. How are international organizations like NATO, like the EU, dealing with the escalating situation right now?
This situation is seen at this particular area because we know that migrants crisis is, well, now in its 6th year because it started in southeastern Europe. But in this particular area, it started maybe a few months ago. And of course, it is seen by the West, by the EU and the NATO as a way of Russia's hybrid war against those organizations, against EU and NATO. And that's something that it is very frequently said by both EU representatives, Polish representatives, and that's something that Russia is strongly denying. But it is undeniable that this thing, what is happening with these migrants, is used by both sides for their own political gains, for their own political reasons, and nobody knows in which direction this is going to go. But what we know is that some kind of negotiations between Belarusian side and the EU is in progress, and maybe in some time next week we will have some details about those discussions and maybe even some results.
Thank you so much for all that, Alyosha Milenkovic, speaking to us from the Polish-Belarusian border. Well, Polish authorities say that migrants have retreated to a camp near the border with Belarus after a violent confrontation. 7 were hurt on Tuesday after Polish security forces used water cannons and tear gas on refugees who were throwing rocks across the border from Belarus. The crisis has led the European Union to widen sanctions on Belarus, accusing it of destabilizing the bloc by encouraging migrants to cross illegally. Up to 4,000 migrants, mostly from war-torn countries in the Middle East, have been camping out along the border in freezing temperatures, hoping to enter the EU. Alyosha Milenkovic brings us this report.
With police sirens and lights, this vehicle is speeding through the checkpoint toward the border. It's just one of the dozens we've seen in less than an hour on this stretch of the road. This is the closest we can get to the Polish border with Belarus. Behind me is the Polish police and military checkpoint, beyond which only authorized security personnel and people who actually live in Kuźnica are allowed. We are just 3 kilometers from the worst pressure point at the border. Police turned back everyone else. A military helicopter in the distance is also heading toward the border. Polish authorities say they're sending reinforcements to the Kuźnica area.
We expect a forceful attempt to cross the border. At the moment, we have directed all the forces we could direct there. These are, of course, officers of the border guard. And of course, we are supported by soldiers and police officers. This section of the border is also patrolled by a police helicopter.
At dusk, we arrived at the nearby village of Bohoniki. It's one of the last remaining Muslim Tatar communities in this part of Poland. A handful of locals have gathered here to bury a Syrian migrant who drowned in the Bug River when he tried to cross from Belarus.
What is happening right now on the Polish-Belarusian border is simply a tragedy. Unfortunately, the refugees there have terrible conditions. That's the worst side of all this. I hope they will receive help in some way, that countries agree on how to do it, how to help them, whether they be taken to Germany or taken back to their own countries.
19-year Ahmed Al-Hassan didn't reach Germany, nor did he have a chance to go back home to Syria. Another migrant who had better luck getting to Germany is also there, on a video phone call with Ahmed's family. A heartbreaking scene, but hardly the last one in this sad story at the Polish-Belarus border. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Kuźnica.
Well, one of the big stories coming out of the African continent right now is Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni vowing to track down all elements who want to destabilize Uganda after twin attacks on Tuesday killed 6 people, including 3 suicide bombers. ISIL claimed responsibility for the attacks in the heart of Kampala. One blast went off near the central police station and another on Parliament Avenue. Police say that intelligence indicates that ISIL-aligned allied democratic forces were responsible. At least 36 people were injured. Well, CGTN's Isabel Nakira is in Kampala and now joins us live for more. Thank you so much for being here, Isabel. What more can you tell us about yesterday's explosions?
Thank you. The situation in Kampala is a bit calm, but of course tense. From last night, the new developments coming up is that the militant group ISIL claimed responsibility of the attacks yesterday. It issued a statement on its Telegraph channel and reported it on its news agency called AMAC. It says its members carried out the attack that claimed the lives of 3 Ugandans yesterday, and of course 3 of its members who blew themselves up in front of the Central Police Station and around Parliamentary Avenue. Of course, about 36 people were injured, 22 of those were police officers. The 4th suspected terrorist that the Uganda police claims that they pursued and shot and injured, we understand he was killed, he died later, but he revealed some useful information. So I guess in the coming few days, that information will give them some leads on more of these bomb attacks in Kampala.
Thank you so much for that, Isabel Nakira, speaking to us from from Uganda's capital, Kampala. Well, let's head over to North America, where powerful storms have killed at least one person and forced thousands to evacuate in Western Canada. 2 people are still missing after strong storms over the past 3 days unleashed flooding and landslides across the Pacific Northwest. Tens of thousands are without power. Flooded highways forced rescuers to use helicopters to save hundreds of people trapped in their vehicles in British Columbia. Train lines have also been damaged, with rail access to Vancouver's port cut off. Residents describe this devastation.
So our home is good. We're safe. We're a little bit above where the flooding has all occurred, and yeah, again, lucky that happened. And my aunt and uncle's house is in the water. My cousin, who just finished having a baby in Kamloops 2 days ago, their house is totally flooded. They have nowhere to go back home. So we're just all waiting, right? We're just all waiting to know what happens and what is happening next, and our kids are asking, and just a lot of uncertainty and destruction, and it's devastating for us. It's going to take years, to get back to where we were.
The Communist Party of China has issued a landmark resolution on its major achievements and experiences over the past century. The document was passed at the 6th plenary session of the 19th CPC Central Committee held in Beijing last week. The General Secretary of the CPC, Xi Jinping, spoke during the meeting.
It's the 3rd resolution of its kind in the party's 100-year history, after the first 2 in 1945 and 1981. The document reviews the party's history since it was founded in 1921, highlighting how it led China to overcome a century of humiliation since the First Opium War. It also summarizes the ideas and practices on China's revolution and nation building that it says have been proven correct. The document notes a series of historic achievements, covering the new democratic revolution, socialist revolution and construction, reform, opening up, and socialist modernization in the new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics. The resolution highlights the efforts and achievements made by the party in the new era following the 18th National Congress in 2012. The resolution attributes the achievements to the valuable historical experience accumulated in 10 aspects: upholding the party's leadership, putting people first, advancing theoretical innovation, staying independent, following the Chinese path, maintaining a global vision, breaking new ground, standing up for ourselves, promoting the united front, and remaining committed to self-reform. The party says the document comes at a critical juncture as China is on its way towards achieving the 2nd centenary goal. China aims to become a modern socialist country by 2049, which will be the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic.
Well, that's it for this edition of The World Today. Our correspondents Daniel Arab Moy in Nairobi and Giram Chala in Addis Ababa are standing by to bring us stories making headlines across the continent in Africa. Let's stay tuned.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
ISIL claims deadly bombings in Uganda's capital, Kampala. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken arrives in Kenya to discuss partnership and regional issues. And heavy rains caused floods in southern Egypt. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers. Here are more stories making headlines. In business, Nigeria's inflation rate slows in October as consumer prices surge by over 15%. And in our continuing series on urbanization, we look at how Egypt is applying the latest tech in its new smart city. Let's begin Africa Live in Kenya, where authorities have arrested prison wardens following the escape of 3 terror convicts. The inmates escaped from a maximum security prison in the capital, Nairobi. Kenya's Interior Cabinet Secretary says their escape was aided by laxity and incompetence. One of the escaped inmates is Muhammad Ali Abikar. He was serving a 41-year sentence for involvement in an attack on Garissa University in 2015 that killed 148 people, mostly students. Kenya's Directorate of Criminal Investigations has described all 3 escapees as dangerous. Police have offered a $536,000 reward for information that could lead to their recapture. Well, we're joined by Dr. Hassan Kanenje, director at the Horn of Institute here in Kenya. How worrying is the situation both in Uganda and Kenya, Doctor, especially after the explosions in Kampala and the escape of terrorists from a Kenyan prison?
First of all, yesterday's explosion in Uganda demonstrates the increasing resilience and ability of Allied Democratic Forces, that is an ISIL affiliate, to conduct attacks outside their immediate area of operation, which is North Kivu. But at the same time, I think it demonstrates the increasing threat, not just to Uganda, but to the Horn of Africa region. Now, the escapees from the Kenyan prison, on the other hand, are more affiliated with Al-Shabaab. And so the danger that these groups may be able to rejoin their previous terrorist organization is very high. And that should, I think, be a reason for everybody to worry of the increasing threat of terrorism and violent extremism in the region.
Dr. Kanenje, do you think that there's a correlation between the 2 events, what happened here in Kenya and then these blasts that took place in Kampala?
While there has been contact, and there's proven contact between Allied Democratic Forces that claim responsibility and Al-Shabaab, so far there is no established evidence of coordination in the recent attack or on the larger mission that they've been able to undertake within the larger Horn of Africa region and the Great Lakes. And in part, I think because Al-Shabaab shares a very different ideology compared to ISIS. Al-Shabaab on one hand is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, and ADF is an ISIS affiliate, and they've not been known to be working together recently. Of course, outside areas such as Cabo Delgado right now in Mozambique, that seems to be having links to the larger East African region.
What do you make of this prison break of terrorists from a Kenyan prison? Well, we seem to have lost Dr. Hassan Kanenje there. He's the director of the Horn of Institute, the International for Strategic Studies. Well, let's now take a look at other news that's making headlines this hour. We'll move over to Ethiopia, where the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has expressed concern over what it calls the continuing unlawful arrests in Ethiopia. According to reports, at least 1,000 individuals are believed to have been detained over the past couple of weeks. The police have been invoking provisions of the state of emergency declared on November the 2nd. More than a dozen Ethiopian staffers working for the UN were arrested last week and have not been released.
With specific regard to the situation of UN local staff, 10 are still being held, as well as some 34 drivers subcontracted by the UN. We call for all those still in detention to be immediately released. or else a court or other independent impartial tribunal should review the reasons for their detention, or they should be formally charged. There are worrying reports that many of those detained have not been informed of the reasons for their detention, nor have they been brought before a court of law or other tribunal to review the reasons for their detention and have not been formally charged. We're also concerned at some reports of ill treatment in detention.
Well, CGTN's Guillaume Chala is in Addis Ababa, and he joins us now for the latest. Guillaume, hi there. The UN expressing concern over what it says are the continuing unlawful arrests of its workers in Ethiopia. What more can you tell us about these arrests? Well, I seem to have lost Guillaume there. Let's now head over to Sudan, where the military there, the General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, says the military has no intention of staying in power. Al-Burhan is the chair of the new ruling council. He made the remarks in the presence of America's Assistant Secretary of African Affairs, Mali V, and the U.S. Charge d'Affaires in Khartoum, Brian Shikan. Both Fee and Shikan met with General al-Burhan on Tuesday. The military took power in late October, arresting several officials, including Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. Al-Burhan has promised to release political detainees unless criminal charges are proven against him. Well, let's now take a look at, let's continue with that story. CGTN's Naba Muhyiddin joins us from Khartoum for the latest. Well, we don't seem to have Naba. Let's now take a short break and return. More news on Africa Live. Do stay with us.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Nairobi as part of his Africa tour. In Kenya, the Secretary of State is set to discuss several security concerns. They include the recent military takeover in Sudan, as well as the widening war in Ethiopia. He has already met with civil society representatives. Their conversation centered on the country's upcoming 2022 national election. He will then head to Nigeria on Thursday before ending his tour in Senegal. Well, now joined by our very own CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy, and he is joined by Professor John Stremlau, an international relations expert. He teaches at South Africa's University of Witwatersrand. Well, Daniel, let's start with you here. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arriving in Kenya last evening as part of his state visit to Africa. What tops his agenda when he speaks with the president here?
Well, Anna, thank you very much. Yes, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is right here in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, where we are speaking from. Now, this is a very key visit by the U.S. Secretary of State. And one thing that we know is that Kenya is a key ally to the United States. And this visit, highlights some of will highlight some of the key issues that the two leaders will try to iron out. But of course, one thing that is common among all the three countries that the Secretary of State will be visiting, Kenya, Nigeria, Senegal, is the question of security, the question of insecurity within the East African region, the question of insecurity within the Sahel region. And when we talk of insecurity, it's not only conflict that we are looking at here. We're also talking of climate change. We are talking about the question of COVID-19 that has ravaged many parts of Africa. So we expect the leaders to discuss these issues. Now, when it comes to the question of insecurity within the East African region, within the Sahel, we do expect that the leaders will try to come up with a viable solution to try to resolve the conflicts, especially what we see happening in neighboring Ethiopia. The leaders will try to, iron out these issues and see how they can join hands together as leaders to see that the conflict between the two parties in Ethiopia, is amicably resolved. But of course, we also know that recently President Uhuru Kenyatta was in Addis Ababa, where he held, talks with Prime Minister Abiy. And this is, of course, concerning what is happening in Tigray. And we do expect that during this afternoon presser, they will be able to issue a communique of what the leaders have agreed and how the United States is going to help try to resolve the crisis that we see happening in Ethiopia, the crisis that is happening in the Sahel. But of course, most importantly, we are seeing the increasing threat within the East African region. Yesterday, for example, the two bombs that went off in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, these are key areas of concern to the United States. It's a key area of concern to Kenya as a neighbor to Uganda. It's a key concern to Africa as a continent. So we do expect that the leaders will try to see how terrorism can be fought, because this is a complex issue that not just one leader can be able to iron out. Not the United States alone. It needs the neighbors' support. It needs Kenya's support. It needs other African support, including the African Union as well.
Professor, let's bring it to you in South Africa. How important is Blinken's visit, and especially the timing that he's decided to come and visit the continent and those three countries in particular?
Well, there are a number of issues that are on the agenda that make this a very timely visit. And I'm not sure what your previous panelists said on the security front, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact this is coming right after Glasgow and the climate change concerns that are very widespread throughout Africa, and for which the Chinese and the Americans did issue a joint statement. And I hope we'll get back into sync with regard to the Green Climate Fund and other means for alleviating climate change effects. There's also the COVID pandemic, which will be high on the agenda in Senegal. And so in addition to the obvious security concerns in Nigeria, and of course, which is in a terrible mess, and Kenya, with Ethiopia imploding, as Secretary Blinken said recently, and warned, and there's the Sudan coup. So he's got a very full agenda, but I hope they don't lose sight of the climate change and the broader U.S.-China relationship.
Let's come back to you, Daniel. Just speak to us about Kenya's role in U.S. Secretary of State Blinken's tour on the African continent. You touched a little bit just about Kenya, having gone and visited Ethiopia with the situation that's going on there. But just talk to us on a broader level, not just about one country, but the whole East Africa region.
Yes, Anna, indeed. One key thing that we must understand here is that Kenya is a very important key ally of the United States. And Kenya is also a member of the United Nations Security Council, a body that is tasked with maintaining peace and security across the world. Now, Kenya being part of that has the responsibility to ensure that there is peace and security across Africa, not just in Kenya, but across the entire continent. And of course, one of the areas is that Kenya is trying to work with the United States, you know, to help broker peace between different warring parties. For example, through the help of IGAD, through the help of the East African Community, and of course through the African Union, the body that is in charge here in our very own continent. So the role that Kenya plays is very vital. And as you also aware, the United States is very much, you know, particular when it comes to her foreign policy. And African countries that are allies to the United States should be seen as having peace and security. So the role of Kenya as a member of the United Nations Security Council plays a pivotal role, you know, in foreseeing this and helping the international community to ensure that there is peace and security reigning on the African continent. So this visit will actually highlight that. And we have already seen Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has been on the forefront to ensure that peace is restored in Africa, the Horn of Africa, and indeed the entire continent as a whole.
Professor Stramal, just speak to us about what you believe Blinken's message is going to be to Africa when he comes, during his visit, and also what kind of relations does China have with the U.S., especially after that virtual meeting of their leaders yesterday?
Well, you know, I see both the Glasgow understanding and the conversation they had for 3.5 hours yesterday virtually as both encouraging. I mean, both China and the United States have their real differences, and particularly in the South China Sea. But in regard to Africa, I think there's a possibility of a win-win-win from practical standpoint that would benefit Africa, that if Africa's given the agency to set its own agenda, there's plenty that they can do. And it's important, I think, to note that Secretary Blinken will be going to Senegal. Senegal is hosting the 8th Ministerial FOCAC, or Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, at the end of this month, November 29-30. And why not reassure the Senegalese who are hosting that this is a ministerial, not a summit. It's a chance for some practical discussions about how African agency could moderate the U.S.-China competition in Africa to Africa's advantage. And, you know, China now is a huge player in Africa, $192 billion of trade in 2019. And the foreign investment from China has gone up to $2.7 billion from a rather small proportion of the U.S. Now it's over 55% of equal to the U.S. investment in Africa. There's a lot that they can talk about in a very practical, concrete, and positive way. And I think this could be a confidence building in the larger U.S.-China relationship and would be beneficial to Africa.
Thank you so much for all that, Professor Stromlau. And also our very own CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy speaking to us on a crucial visit from the U.S. Secretary of State to those 3 African countries. Well, let's head over to Sudan now, where General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan says the military has no intention of staying in power. Al-Burhan is the chair of the new ruling council. He made the remarks in the presence of America's Assistant Secretary of African Affairs, Molly Fee, and the U.S. Charge d'Affaires in Khartoum, Brian Shukan. Both Fee and Shukan met with General Al-Burhan on Tuesday. The military took power in late October, arresting several officials, including Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok. Al-Burhan has promised to release political detainees unless criminal charges are proven against them. Well, CGTN's Naba Mukhadeen joins us live in Khartoum for the latest. Naba, another mass protest against the military is expected in Khartoum. What is the latest on the ground there?
Hi. In the ground, the bridges are still closed. It was closed since the morning. Main streets are also closed. Also, the military headquarters is closed by heavy deployments of military and security and vehicles also. On ground, the protesters will gather very soon, and there were calls for the protesters to go to Abdullah Hamdok's house, but pro-democracy groups has cancelled these calls because they fear more riots and more turmoil. There is checkpoints in the whole country, in the whole capital, checkpoints of military and security, and access and movement for people is very difficult, and all of the businesses are shut down. The banks, hospitals, universities, everything is closed, preparing for the protest or fearing the possible turmoil. And also the phone signals were shut down just a few minutes ago. Now there is no phone signals. People cannot connect together, and people are waiting for the protest, and there is also more scheduled protests in the upcoming days.
Now, the U.S. official Molly Fee met ousted Prime Minister Hamdok and the Transitional Sovereign Council. Do we know what was discussed at both meetings?
Yes, the military expressed the commitment the commitment to the constitutional draft and to not stick with the power. The military chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan said the military don't want to take the power and will discuss with all political parties and will release the political detainees in the upcoming days, and already the procedures of releasing the detainees has started. He also assured that more discussions will be held with all parties, not excluding anyone, in order to form other governance structures in the upcoming days. And Molly Fee has assured the U.S. desire to support the transitional democratic change in Sudan and to see Sudanese ending their dispute alone. And she assured also the U.S. role in reconciliation and in urging all of the parties to hold talks and to get out of this political crisis.
Thank you so much for all that. Nawa Mukhadeen speaking to us from Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Well, the commander of the eastern-based Libyan National Army, General Khalifa Haftar, has officially applied to register as a candidate in the upcoming presidential race. Haftar's candidature is yet to be reviewed and approved by Libya's elections committee. He applied to vie just one day after former leader Muammar Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, signed his presidential candidacy application. Well, CGTN's Adel Al-Marouchi is in Cairo. He's been following this story for a while now and has got so much information for us. Adel, hi there. First, it was Saif Gaddafi and now General Khalifa Haftar. What has been the reaction in Libya and the region to their election bids?
Well, their candidature or possible candidature so far has been widely celebrated from one side and widely condemned from the other. The wounds of division, it appears, in Libya have not healed yet. Therefore, there seems to be the same stances towards anyone who would be representing either the Western Bloc or the Eastern Bloc. Now, Saif al-Islam al-Qaddafi and General Khalifa Haftar both are represent the old guard or the old regime. They have strong supporters in the eastern side. On the contrary, on Western Libya, where there's a dominance of Islamist politicians and militia groups, they are contradicting or standing against these two. The Western-based military prosecution has sent a complaint or an appeal to the elections committee asking it to reject the application for both Saif al-Islam and Khalifa Haftar. Now, the United Nations has called on everyone to calm down in terms of reaction, and it stressed that any acceptance or rejection should come out only from the elections committee and no one should interfere in that process. In general, this is the first. We're talking about so far about 6 presidential candidates. Only 2 of them are significant figures, Saif al-Islam and Khalifa Haftar, but we're still waiting for more politicians and key figures, especially from the western side, including the former Interior Minister Fathi Bashagha, and there is still a possible chance for the current interim Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibeh to join the race.
Adel, General Haftar has previously been backed by several countries in the region. What are you hearing about what their views are on his candidacy for president?
Well, General Khalifa Haftar in general has wide support within Libya and also on regional and international level. For example, Russian experts have been training his armed forces during the past years. He has strong influence in that regard, and therefore internationally he seems to be several international and regional players. Now, domestically, there are many concerns, of course, especially from the Western Bloc, who oppose Haftar. He was basically one of the first to apply for the presidential race. He has applied for his candidature, but we're still waiting for the Elections Committee to process this application and confirm whether he will be officially running in the presidential race or not.
Khalifa Haftar announced his presidential candidacy on Tuesday morning. Haftar was a military general in the Libyan armed forces under President Muammar Gaddafi. Yet differences between him and the late Libyan president saw him exiled to the United States of America, where he got his U.S. citizenship.
I salute the constructive initiatives offered by friendly nations that helped to push us towards the democratic options and urged us to hold the presidential and parliamentary elections on its specified dates. Our country stands at a crossroad, a road to freedom, independence and development, or the road to tension and corruption. After so experiences, you alone have to choose the road.
After the 2011 uprising, Haftar returned to Libya and reformed what remained of the divided Libyan military based in the eastern part of the country. He then led military offensives against his countrymen, mostly Islamist militias. The latest one was a failed march in 2019 to seize the capital Tripoli, west of Libya.
His candidacy after Gaddafi's son could fuel tension in Libya, especially that there are many political and popular parties in western Libya who oppose Haftar's candidacy. That's because he was involved in the civil war throughout the past years. On the other hand, the parties in the east believe that it's Libya's salvation and no one else could restore security to Libya.
Haftar's aspirations to lead Libya are not a secret. The commander of the eastern-based Libyan National Army Forces stepped aside from his position on the 23rd of September. That's exactly 3 months before the December 24 election, as the presidential election law dictates.
Accused of war crimes and mass murder, Haftar is either extremely hated or loved among Libyan tribes. He enters his presidential race, though, strongly. His Libyan National Army controls most of Libya's mainland, but it's still not clear, however, whether this security stronghold will get him the votes he needs to lead. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's now take a short break and return to more in Africa Live, including heavy rains caused floods in southern Egypt. And in our continuing series on urbanization, we look at how Egypt is applying the latest tech in its new smart city. Heavy rains have caused flooding in the southern part of Egypt. The province of Aswan was the worst affected by the rainfall, which caused power outages, damaged houses, vehicles, and farms. Health officials say at least 3 people were killed in those floods. The increasing waters also drove scorpions to seek shelter in people's homes. And as a result, over 400 people were hospitalized from scorpion stings. Many of the victims have since been discharged after they were given anti-venom doses.
In a moment, strong air suddenly blew, and water rushed inside the house like a sea. We took our children and ran outside the house. I don't know from where the strength came to me to carry my sister's children in one hand, and with the other hand, I carried my mother and took them out of the house in the middle of the water.
I was splashing in the water because of its intensity. The water was very high in the street, and we carried people on our shoulders to save them from the severity of the water.
Well, technology is at the heart of Egypt's new capital, which is simply known as the new administrative capital. Situated 45 kilometers east of the current capital, Cairo, the new city is a fourth-generation city. It relies on smart technological solutions to automate its services and management. China is a partner in this new Egyptian dream. It's building the central business district, which is going to be the landmark of the new administrative capital. Here's Adil Maruchi with more.
From the struggles of bureaucratic red tape and manual management of cities to complete digital solutions, this is how Egypt is promoting its new administrative capital. The new city is expected to be home for 6.5 million residents who are going to receive all government services through mobile applications. Construction of the 176,000-acre mega project is taking place in the eastern desert. The initial cost for the first phase of the project is around $25 billion.
The Housing Ministry is currently developing a number of fourth-generation cities. There are about 22 cities, on top of which is the new administrative capital. This is part of the nation's Sustainable Development Vision for 2030. We are building cities for the future. It is a smart city. It applies the international standards for smart cities. It focuses on decentralizing government services, which will ease a citizen's daily life.
All streets will be managed by smart traffic light systems. 6,000 cameras will be able to automatically detect legal violations and identify criminals at large. This is the Central Business District, standing at the heart of the new capital with Africa's tallest 400 meters high building. It's the newest landmark in Egypt. China State Construction Engineering Corporation is leading this iconic project.
China is leading a major role in the new administrative capital. It is building the Central Business District, which is an important project built over 40 acres in the heart of the capital. It will be launched with the inauguration of the first phase of the capital. Cooperation between us is very successful. During the past 2 years, we have faced many challenges because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet, we have seen how construction continued without interruption. That confirms the importance of Egyptian-Chinese cooperation.
Light poles will provide free wireless networks to cover the whole city. A major project to digitize 300 million government documents is underway to serve the growing smart capital of Egypt.
The new administrative capital will be eco-friendly. From cars to trains and buses, all transportation modes will be powered by electricity. Building rooftops will have solar cells. Egypt is opening the door for foreign investors to invest in this multi-billion-dollar project, which makes it not only an Egyptian dream, but also a business opportunity for the world. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, from the new administrative capital of Egypt.
Over in Nigeria, inflation slowed to a 10-month low in October as consumer prices increased by just under 16% compared with September's reading of 16.6%. But as Philly has the reports from the nation's federal capital of Abuja, the majority of people in Africa's largest economy say that they're not seeing any drop in prices.
Prices of commodities dropped by 1.23% from last month, but rose slightly by 1.76% when compared to the same month last year. The NBS says inflation rate in urban areas is worse in the rural areas. Products like beverages, eggs, bread, cereals, and staple foods are still high in stores like this across the country. In spite of the marginal drop this month, it's a burden for many consumers who think the reality on ground is even worse.
Since this year, we've been experiencing a continuous hike in the cost of goods. The government has to do something about this.
It's really sad that one incomes remain the same, but the number of things you can buy continue to reduce because of all these increments.
Inflation is still something that more than 80 million Nigerians who live below the $1.90 a day will have to deal with. The country's minimum wage is about $80 per month. Nigeria has been battling inflation since bouncing back from a recession last year caused by a COVID-19 pandemic and a fall in crude oil prices, a main source of revenue for the economy. The government says it's optimistic that things will get better as business activities pick up within the country and on a global scale. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Let's now take a look at what's coming up in sport. Court to rule whether Kenya FA President Nick Mwendwa will be detained or not as corruption case continues. Well, ousted Football Kenya Federation President Nick Mwendwa has returned to court this morning in Nairobi, where a judge is set to rule on the application by the Directorate of Criminal Investigation to detain him. Prosecution counsel Evelyn Onunga had asked the courts to detain Mwendwa for 14 days to allow them to conclude investigations into the suspected fraudulent acquisition of public property. Mwendwa was arrested on Friday in connection with cases of alleged fraudulent acquisition of public property. He was questioned about how FKF spent over $3.8 million advanced to the Federation from 2016 by the Sports, Arts and Social Development Ministry for running football activities, as well as a $2 million given for the preparations of the national team for the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations, among other allegations of corruption. His court appearance comes a day after he got a temporary reprieve after the court released him on bail. Well, the International Cricket Council has announced that South Africa, Zimbabwe and Namibia are to host the 50 Overs Cricket World Cup in 2027. The tournament was last hosted on the continent by South Africa, Kenya and Zimbabwe back in 2003. The return after a long absence is a boost for the sport in Southern Africa, with Namibia co-hosting the tournament for the first time. CGTN CS Duplessis has that story.
The announcement has certainly lifted the spirits of many South African cricket fans after the Proteas failed to make it out of their group at the recent T20 World Cup. The thought that a major cricket tournament will be played on South African soil for the first time since the ICC Champions Trophy back in 2009 has left a smile on many fierce supporters of the game here. From a South African point of view, very little needs to be done to infrastructure, and perhaps all that is required is a lick of paint. But for Namibia and Zimbabwe, a bit more will be needed to make sure venues like in Windhoek and Bulawayo and Harare are ready to host the tournament. The Cricket World Cup is regarded as a major tournament, unlike the FIFA Soccer World Cup or Olympics, which are known as mega tournaments, meaning that FIFA and IOC give funding for upgrades of the facilities. While for the ICC, the funding model works differently and sees the host nation benefit in other ways while being responsible for the upgrades of their stadia. Cricket South Africa has expressed its delight with the announcement, as it will assist in growing the game on the African continent. The ICC announced other host nations for various tournaments, with the most notable being the United States, co-hosting the 2024 T20 World Cup along with the West Indies. Only 5 years to go, but already the excitement is building ahead of the return of the cricketing showpiece. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Centurion, South Africa.
Ibrahim Rutich, the husband of slain Kenyan Olympic runner and world record holder AGNES TIROP, was charged with her murder. He pleaded not guilty in a Kenyan court on Tuesday. The 41-year-old Rutich had been ordered to undergo a mental health test before entering a plea. TIROP was found stabbed to death at her home in the Rift Valley town of Iten on the 13th of October. The case has shone a spotlight on violence against women in the East African country. The bail hearing is set for the 1st of December.
Is it true that you, Ibrahim, keep Kemboi Rotich alias Manu on the 12th October 2021 in the rural estate at Iten, KU North Elgeyo Marakwet County? You murdered AGNES Jebet TIROP? What can you tell the court?
I plead not guilty.
We turn to the race for Qatar 2022. African champions Algeria have advanced to the third round of CAF World Cup qualifying after holding Burkina Faso to a 2-2 draw on Tuesday to finish top of the final Group A standings. Riyad Mahrez put Algeria ahead in the 21st minute, and Zakaria Sanogo pulled Burkina Faso level before halftime in the 37th minute. Sofiane Feghouli restored the Desert Foxes' lead midway through the second half after finishing with Yus Bilali claiming his second assist of the match. Issoufou Dayo's 84th minute penalty pulled Burkina Faso back on level terms, but the visitors couldn't manage a late winner in a match they needed victory, much to the delight of Algerian coach Jamal Belmadi.
For me, it is not my heart that rules, it is my brain. So if in my heart I have a lot of things that I wish, I'm not putting these things away. The opponent who will present themselves in front of us, we will go and prepare well for the match. The purpose is to qualify for the World Cup, no matter what the cost is. It does not matter which opponent will be in front of us, so we'll study well and prepare well to qualify.
Meanwhile, Cameroon beat Cote d'Ivoire 1-0 in Yaoundé to finish top of Group D, as Tunisia beat Zambia 3-1 at the Raids to claim Group B. Nigeria also progressed the playoff round after drawing 1-0 with Cape Verde to complete the roster of 10 teams that will vie for the 5 African World Cup slots. Morocco, Egypt, Mali, Senegal, DR Congo and Ghana have had earlier sealed their playoff places.